I would never hire someone in my team who does not understand the technical depths of what we're building. I think that is one of the most important, if not the most important skills of a product manager.
Today I'm with Ruhi, who is a wonderful expert in multiple industries, having worked across multiple tech companies, particularly on the product side. I'm excited to invite her to our discussion on our podcast today. Ruhi, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with me. Could you perhaps maybe give a little bit of an intro on your journey, your background, your work profile, the things that you've experienced professionally?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here and having this chat. My name is Ruhi. I grew up in India, a very small town called Ambala. Though when I say small, and people like you who grew up in Southeast Asia, when they look at me suspiciously, it's not really small. But let's say a very small town called Ambala. I lived there in the 80s and the 90s. And I'd say a few years later, I became an engineer, much like if you grew up in India, it's as mandatory as liking cricket. So did that. Worked in India for a few years. I found, studying in university, I found mathematics and finance to be quite exciting. So I ended up getting a job as a trader at Deutsche Bank. I loved the work, but hated the culture. And sorry to say, some people, it's everything you might think of having seen The Wolf of Wall Street, except the lunch breaks were less exciting and far less illegal, if I may. And so I left India kind of in search for meaning in a better career, ended up at business school in the US, explored a few things. There was the strange experience where I'd never lived outside India ever. It was new cultures, new people, new experiences, but I was lucky to have this amazing group of people around me to support me and find the next thing. And I still remember the first thing I was told by our placement community when we landed on campus was, look, you can change one or two of these three things, which is geography, industry, and functions. You can't change all three. But much like the stubborn me, I ended up there and I was like, no, I want to change all three. I don't want to do finance, I don't want to be a trader, and I don't want to go back to India. I want to change all three. And so I ended up doing that through, I'd say, a bit of luck, a bit of perseverance, and a lot of support from people around me. I ended up at Amazon Web Services. I'd say still my fondest product memory. I had the most fun as a product manager in S3, which was cloud storage, where I spent a few years, moved to London from Seattle, joined Prime Video. I wanted to still stay within Amazon. I felt the company had more to teach me and I had more to give back. And this was, towards the end of my Amazon journey a few years later. I was getting to the point where I was really enjoying it, wasn't feeling challenged. I felt Amazon had lost some of its, day one culture, as we used to call it back in the day, and was looking for new opportunities. And then also ended up finding this amazing opportunity at Stripe along the way. Spent a few years there. And, in my last role, I was heading product for our Europe markets. And now I'm taking a few weeks off before I start a new role.
Could you maybe tell us a little bit about your new role?
Yes, absolutely. It's a UK based, and this was something I felt passionate about when I was at Stripe. I was looking after the European market, trying to convince quite often US leadership about certain decisions they were making on resourcing, on how the company thought about Europe as a market, what kind of products we were building. And the one thing I absolutely wanted in my next role was it had to be a European business. And so when I came across what is now called Redpin, which is the company I'm joining, and came across their mission and found out the fact that the executive team is based out of here, they're building something for the world based in London, that excited me a lot. So to tell you what Redpin does, they're a property tech business trying to create embedded payments and software solution for buying property overseas. So imagine the entire chain of property buying experience, all the tech solutions you need. Yes, and I haven't bought property yet, but hopefully in the future I can truly, genuinely empathize with the product we're going to be building, which I'm excited about. So if you think about Toast or Flywire, Redpin is trying to do the same for property as Toast does for restaurants and Flywire does for education. So that's a bigger vision.
One of the things the themes we're going to be talking about today is product. Do you think, as being either a product manager or a product leader, do you think it's really important to also kind of like mentally be a consumer of that product?
This is a slightly controversial answer, if I may. I'll say two things. One, personally, I have never optimized for the actual industry I am taking the next job in. I will come back to why. I've always looked at what is the actual tech that is being built and does that excite me? And before even that, who are the people building it and do they excite me? But back to your question of, I do think you need to be able to empathize with the problem of the consumer. Like that is a must, right? That is a part of the product job. I have never felt the need to feel passionate about the product in order to do a good job as a product leader. I don't watch TV a lot. I spent a few years at Prime Video. I don't think I'm the biggest fan of or a consumer and the most passionate vocal person about it. But what I was actually doing day to day, the core tech we were building, was so exciting to me that it didn't matter. The end product was not something I thought about day to day. I do think this is a controversial question, mostly because you're supposed to put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and you're supposed to empathize. But I think you can do that without having bought property or without watching Prime Video every day and still being able to build for it.
The reason I asked that question is because like product is quite an interesting thing from my perspective, because product managers in technology, I feel like there's a high amount of conversion to being, I'm going to say this carefully, but glorified project managers. Um, and I feel like, being product management is something different. We've just done this exercise in our company in Vodworks, where we did like an assessment of some people who wanted to apply for a product management position. I remember through the exercise, I was looking for someone who could actually see a little bit between the commercial lines, a little bit, like, be able to see. It's not necessarily, I agree with you completely. You don't have to necessarily be the prime buyer for a product. Obviously, I'm talking a B2B product, not a B2C product. But it was interesting to see how you could like convert technical people to that mindset. So I guess my next question for you is, from your perspective, how important is it for someone who works in product management to be technically aware?
I would never hire someone in my team who does not understand the technical depths of what we're building. I think that is one of the most important, if not the most important skills of a product manager, mostly because if you think about, you said product is glorified project management. Yes, with some stuff added to it. Yeah, sometimes. But if you think about how PMs execute or build stuff, it's the engineers who are writing the actual code, right? And if you can't build that trust with the engineers, and if you're not best friends with your eng lead or the entire team, you're not going to be able to successfully launch anything. You're not going to be able to successfully drive the business in any direction. And I think if you don't passionately feel excited about the tech stack and understand end to end what you're building, what if we're all in this API world, what those APIs do, how they're built, what they look like. If you can't walk up to a whiteboard and draw a very high level diagram to me of fundamentally here are the components of an architecture, I wouldn't hire that person. And that's just me personally. There are some products that are not technical and that just need someone to look at the user experience and be commercially minded and say, let's just go solve this. And I think in the world of LLMs, maybe a few years down the line, PMs will not need to be technically knowledgeable because there is this whole world of writing code very fast without a lot of effort that will make things simpler and you can make decisions without knowing the technical depths. I don't think that's the world we're in today, maybe in the future.
I completely agree with you. I say that that's distance between having a non-technical capability inside of a technical company. I think that's closing very, very fast. It's interesting that said that, like, from a product management perspective, you wouldn't hire someone who couldn't understand the technical stack. I kind of lean to people who are more market research, because that's why I feel like sometimes in product people fail, is understanding how to prioritize, whether it be functions or features or something. what is the market demanding? What is the competition doing? What are the consumers demanding? Because a lot of our businesses are B2, even if you're B2B, you're B2B2C, right? So let me ask you a slightly different question. Hypothetically, say I was interviewing with you, you're my interviewee, and you're looking to say, okay, I want to build like an anatomy of the perfect product manager. What would you say to me are maybe like say like 3 or 4 or 5 different things that build that anatomy?
Good question. I'd say I'd start with technical depth, just because one, we were talking about it. Two, I do think, and in my head, technical depth ties to this idea of first principles thinking, right? Understanding if you're building something and if you don't understand it down to the bottom and the very detail, I don't think you'd be a great PM versus a good PM. So that's one. I think how well do you understand the tech stack? The second is, I'd say something I have appreciated only working at Stripe in the last few years, and I didn't value the skill as much 3 years ago. And that's this idea of being commercially minded. I think I spent a lot of my time, especially in the PM function, in organizations that were large and massive, and I was mostly involved in the very depths of the technical nuances, building the infrastructure, building the platform, building the components, and didn't have a lot to do with the business outcomes of it. Partly because I was in like a rocket ship that was growing on its own, so we didn't have to worry about it, and partly because the organization was so big, so you were so removed from the customer support team or the sales guy. Yes, you talk to account managers and the customers, but not necessarily all of GTM or go to market. I think at Stripe, I had this newfound appreciation of PMs who can operate as general managers, who say, I'm responsible for maybe business unit X, and I will think about what is the business outcome, and I'm not just a feature factory. And I think that's what differentiates excellent PMs, in my opinion, where they can step away from, yes, we launched feature X, but 3 years later, how's it doing? How's it impacting not just the money we make from it tomorrow, but 3 years later, are the margins going to change for this product? And how do we think about the market context there? So I think having this combination of being able to be technically expert and then be able to combine it with this commercial mindset, I think is if I was shaping this ideal PM candidate, would be the next thing I'd think of. And I'd say finally, if I had to add, just one more thing, it would be execution. Like, not you can't run away from it. How fast can you ship things, whether you're in a 50 people organization or a 5,000 people organization or a 50,000 people organization? Like, can you wade through the bureaucracy in a 50,000 people organization? And can you do without all the support functions in a 50 people organization and still be equally successful and equally fast, given the constraints you're put in? So yeah, those would be some top line things.
One of the big questions I wanted to ask you, which was related to some of the stuff that we have spoken about, was you've obviously worked in environments where you have worked on products which were already built and you're enhancing them. And then I get the feeling you've also worked on products that weren't already built and you were working from scratch. What do you think is the difference in mentality between those two situations?
I'd say let's start with the products that are kind of already built, right? It's almost like saying joining existing business versus starting your own company, right? That's the difference, where you've got product market fit in a lot of situations on a product that's already built. You probably are in less risky situation of doing something that is going to fail. And so what you're doing is feature improvements. You've got, small and big things around it. And you've also got the benefit of rich customer feedback, where you've got all of this insight from actual users. Whereas, and I'm just, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking through big products I've worked on, like AWS, that existed, were well loved. And I'd say 90% of the S3 roadmap back then was determined by direct customer feedback. And it was just a very there's less uncertainty in what you're building, the value of it, whether somebody's going to use it. And the challenges there were more around how will you actually execute on it? How will you deliver some of the technical complexities? How will you make the user experience best in class? Whereas for something that is net new, and I remember my first project at S3 was launching open banking, and something that doesn't exist in the market. The industry is new. We haven't really tested it out. We don't have real customers. We don't really know what the right price point is. There's so much uncertainty around it that you're looking to optimize what is your intuition about this product, what is your intuition about the future of the market, and then be okay with that trade-off, right? That trade-off is we're taking a risk and we're going to go ahead and maybe not be able to launch the best product or not be able to launch the most successful thing, but that's okay because we're experimenting and trying. And then I think something else you need in this scenario, which is different from the existing product, is being able to shift and pivot quite fast, right? You're in the market. You don't have the luxury of saying, we're going to wait a year to see if somebody really adopts it, and then we'll see if we need to change it. I think being able to pivot, experiment, and then be so much closer to early users and finding those superhero customers that will adopt your product early on and will give you rich customers. And then I think the fallacy that I've seen some of us fall into quite often is you find these one or two early customers, but you have no data to say, is this what your representative customer set will look like? And should you take that feedback very seriously and try to change and evolve your product? Or should you, take this feedback as one data point and then think about what the future needs are, what the market is? So I think it's a whole different mindset in addition to actual day-to-day work and speed of working as well.
I really, really enjoyed how you responded to the whole kind of existing product versus new product side. If you were, say, setting up your own manuscript of what you think a product person needs to work towards in terms of if they're coming into this role new, because there's a lot of people I meet personally as well who want to become and go into product management. If you were going to say to them a manuscript of where are the areas that they should focus, what would be your advice to maybe a young 20, 21, 22-year-old who's kind of trying to build a career in that area?
I think a lot of people ask me I found this online product management course, or should I go to university and study X and study Y? And I think if you're already in a job and you're doing something in, say, the tech sector, and you want to switch into product as a function, and maybe you're an engineer, maybe you're on the go-to-market side, maybe you're a salesperson, I don't think there's anything that needs to be taught in a class that a PM does that you can't pick up on the job. So the first advice I mostly give people who ask me this question is, I don't think you necessarily need to go do a course on product management and go take a break from your career and study in a university and learn about product management. To be honest, if you were to ask me how to break down what are the skills, there aren't any specific skills, right? You're just corralling a whole bunch of people to get together behind a vision to launch something exciting, and you design that experience, and then the engineers go write the code, and then you make sure go-to-market is equipped to go sell the product that you've made. So there's no net. You don't need to learn a specific programming language. You don't need to learn the art of negotiation. You don't need to learn anything specific. You can just pick up on the job what you need to do. Every organization has a different toolkit of what they use for product management. Somebody might use Jira, somebody might use Google Sheets, somebody might use something else. Again, all things you learn on the job. I think the stuff that is important is being able to do that over a small period to demonstrate that you can do this job. The industry we're in, or the economic situation around us, is hard. That I've seen most people who don't have the exact PM background finding it hard to crack into PM roles today. This might change in the future. It was a little better in the past, which means that if you're in an organization and you have a path to internally switch, I think that's the easiest way today to get into product. If you're doing function X within your organization and you find a project that needs help, just, raise your hand, go offer that help. Try to do most things that are needed from that job And they will naturally have a component of product management, which will get noticed in your organization, which will then find you that natural path, which will then get PM on your resume. And then you can find that next thing if it happens to be outside the current company you're in. So I'd say one is just within your own context, finding those opportunities to do it. Second is finding out if you really enjoy this or not. I know this, product sounds like the sexy thing that people want to do these days. One, it's not for everyone. Two, it's not always an enjoyable job. So I think it depends on where do you find your drive and excitement from. I often look back at my career and think about, oh, would I have been more excited being an engineer because I am an introvert. I would love sitting all day on my laptop just coding. Maybe I should have taken that career path. I question that quite often. And so I'd say, think about what do you enjoy? Where do you get your energy from? And do you like things like context switching? Do you like being responsible for 10 different things in a day? Do you like being in meetings quite a lot? Like there's so much that you can in small pieces, there's so much that you can observe about a day in the life of a PM over, let's say, 5 days, and look at it and say, is this something I'll enjoy putting myself in? So I think if you're early in your career, that's an important thing to consider. Would you really enjoy it, or are you just getting into it because everybody thinks product is where they want to be? Yeah, those are some things. And then, we spoke about technical depth. I think if you're not passionate about a technical architecture, you will not enjoy the work day to day because engineers will not trust you.
At least in the realm of technical products.
Correct. And like coming from me, I've only ever spent time in product roles that are technical. So this is, again, all of this is biased from my own experience and may not apply to your own experience, but those are some thoughts.
From your perspective, I mean, you've come from obviously Asia, you've been in America, you've been in the UK, and also there is no doubt that there is a gender gap in technology. I've seen it myself. I run a technology company. What do you think are key ways, in your opinion, of, say, just even like a small company that has 100, 150 people, like Vodworks, my company, in improving that kind of support for women to be able to come into the technology sector, to increase? And bear in mind, we also have like a large office in South Asia, so that's something you can relate to as well. What would be your advice for saying, okay, well, like, how do we increase this this difference?
We can't solve it in one conversation and with a few tips that I might have, but small and big things help. At Stripe, I saw a lot of senior leadership have a good ratio of women. That was just part of life, that it didn't become something that we talked about. And I thought that was such a nice way of a healthy environment that was nurtured by people don't question women anymore because they see half the women in senior leadership, half the people in senior leadership are women. And I think getting there obviously takes a long time, and Stripe is very thoughtful about this hiring practices and takes a lot of care, and not every organization can afford to hire with that speed and with that level of hiring bar. So I think a few things I've tried to do along the way is promote women when you see good talent. Make sure that we're doing it. Catch biases in your team. Like, this is all routine stuff, nothing new that I'm telling you. So we're making the promotion process, for example, is so opaque and such a black box in most companies that women who generally don't have a tendency to promote themselves will get left behind. And so, small ways that you can make that process transparent, small ways in which you can make the funnel better. I think a lot of people talk about start at the education level. And I think, yes, there are big and small ways in which the world is getting there, but it goes a long way.
We've been through like a very interesting journey with Ruhi today. And I think she's opened our perspectives to multiple topics. She's opened our eyes to the whole product management side, but also talked to us about the experiences of transitioning from from South Asia to North America, Europe, and stuff, like, which based on what's happening in the world at the moment, is actually probably very relevant. But also talking about some subjects which are slightly more complicated to talk about, which is also, like gender bias in industry and things like this. I just want to say a massive, massive thank you to her for being so open and being so transparent and participating in this conversation. And I really, really look forward to when me and her have a chance to hang out.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me here, Sakib. It's been wonderful chatting with you, and I'm glad we were able to make this happen.